Today we're going to talk about World War II, D-Day, and perpendicular bisectors in a triangle. And yes, they are actually connected to each other. First, let's talk about the world. World War II was this huge event in human history which has all sorts of long-lasting effects, things you might wonder about. Things like, why are people over here always fighting each other? Why are the countries over here so small? What's with these two countries always picking fights but never actually fighting each other? Why in the world would anybody build this thing? And wait a minute, 50 million people died? Actually, more than 50 million people. Now, to understand this assignment, you need a little bit of a working knowledge about things that happened in World War II. It's a very complicated event, but I'm going to try to cram down some parts of this thing into like just 2 minutes here. So, if you have an uncle that spends his time watching Discovery Channel and he sees this assignment, he's going to tell you I skipped a whole bunch of things. Yep, I'm skipping a whole bunch of things. Many of them are actually really important, and I'm even going to tell one little lie near the end to make the math a little bit more interesting. But here is a very short summary of World War II. Back in the 1930s, there was a few countries spread out across the world that thought, hey man, we're really awesome and powerful. We should take other people's stuff. And so they did. They started conquering other neighbors. Now, if they liked their neighbors when they conquered them, they just took their stuff. If they didn't like them, they killed them and took their stuff anyway. And they had conquered all these parts of the world. And they had plans to conquer this part of the world. And really, they probably wanted to conquer this part of the world. But this is about as far as they got. Because after a few years of them conquering little countries and taking over their stuff, a whole bunch of other countries decided, hey, all right, we gotta put an end to all this conquering and killing and stuff. And so these countries in blue, called the Allied powers, got together to stop the countries in red, called the Axis powers, to try to keep them from taking over the earth. This led to a huge war with people being killed and fighting and all sorts of terrible stuff happening all over Earth. But we are just going to look at one little geometry problem that happened right here in Europe, specifically in France. So we're going to zoom in on this. See, in this part of the world, the country that was doing the conquering was called Germany. And they had conquered pretty much all of Europe and had been at war with most of the people around them for a few years. But after a few years into the war, the blue team, called the Allied powers, ended up defeating them in a few places and had some armies stowed up in a few places, specifically here in southern Britain, down in Italy, and in northern Africa. And their goal was to kick the Germans out of France. They wanted France back. I'm not sure why, but they wanted France back. So, what they ultimately did is they sent the army that was in England to here, a part in northern France called Normandy, which led to a big gruesome battle that's the subject of a lot of movies. The problem was they didn't want to do this and have a whole bunch of tanks sitting there waiting for them. So what they tried to do is try to convince the conquerors that they might attack from down here, or they might attack from over here, or maybe they're going to come around and attack over here, or maybe they'll attack over there. That way, all the reinforcements would have to spread themselves out or go move towards the center of the country so that they could respond to an attack from any of those locations. How did they convince their enemy that they might attack all these other places? Well, they did lots of cool stuff. One of the cool things they did is they built all sorts of fake armies in different parts of the world with tanks and trucks and stuff made out of balloons and cardboard. So they'd see a big fake army ready to conquer, and they'd put that army, the balloon and cardboard army, in the wrong spot so that they would think that the attack was coming from somewhere else. Here's an example of a couple of people just picking up and moving a tank made out of balloons. Here's a truck made out of cardboard. And if I can find it, they also did planes the same way and made a whole fake Air Force. Where's the fake Air Force? There it is. They made fake Air Forces out of just like plastic. Anyway, so they did all sorts of things to convince the other armies that their army was getting ready to attack a different location. What does that have to do with geometry? Well, there's also a link that you should have gotten from your teacher that has GeoGebra with this map in it. Actually, in GeoGebra, the map looks like this. And here are 3 locations that they were trying to convince their enemy that they were going to attack. We are going to find the point, the city in France, that's the same distance to all 3 of those locations. And the way we do that is by making a triangle and constructing perpendicular bisectors. So you're going to go to that link, and here's what you're going to do. You're going to put a point A in Marseille on France's southern shore, point B in La Rochelle on France's western shore, and point C in Calais on France's northern shore. Those 3 points are then going to be connected with segments to make a triangle. Once you have a triangle connected, you're going to create the perpendicular bisector for each of those 3 sides. If you do it right, the perpendicular bisectors, all 3 of them, should meet at the same spot. And that's the goal of the assignment, is to find the city in France that's the same distance to all 3 of those locations. So, your assignment, once again, you're going to get this map in GeoGebra. You're going to put a point at these 3 cities, Marseille, La Rochelle, and Calais in France. Turn it into a triangle. Create a perpendicular bisector for each side of the triangle, and find the point where those 3 perpendicular bisectors meet.